Okay, so my name is Victoria Barrywoods. I lead recruitment for the UK business for Euro API. Most people wouldn't have heard of that business, but in 2021, it was decided that Sanofi, so global pharmaceutical, same size as AZ, GSK, would separate out their industrial affairs business, which meant that coming out of an 80,000 strong business into 3,600 globally. And the whole idea behind that is that it's easier to make, manufacture and develop active pharmaceutical ingredients for third parties if you're outside of a global pharma. So a big change for the business. So it meant during that period of time, we had to decouple everything. So it's almost like being in a startup situation, but you have all the baggage of your history within an organization. So that's all of our systems, processes, and we're also a regulated industry as well. So a very complex process. And when I joined the business in 2021, the whole idea was this was a great opportunity to move everything in-house. So that's contingent workforce and also talent acquisition on the permanent side as well. So my background is agency and then in-house in pharma and also in security. So permanent recruitment felt like a really familiar space for me. So I got the systems, processes, everything set up. Contingent felt like something I'd never even touched before, because in the agency I worked in, it was separate, and actually in-house it was also separate. So it felt like a real area of mystery to me. But there was a deadline, because when you become a brand new organisation, we listed on the Euronext in May 2022, you have to separate from the existing contracts that you have within your original business. So within Sanofi, they outsourced everything from a recruitment perspective on the permanent and also on the contingent workforce side. So for the UK, it meant by May 2022, we had to have something new in place for our contingent workforce. We'd gone about the process in, I suppose, the 12 months before, thinking about, well, what's the actual solution here? Because we weren't big enough in the UK to necessarily go to another provider. If I'm honest, it wasn't working very well in terms of time to hire and also cost. So really, the market was a bit of a mystery in terms of thinking, well, how are we going to do this? And actually, when I went out to market, what I found is that there was either the MSP solution, or there was agencies that were payrolling contractors on behalf of organisations. And actually, I didn't want an agency, and I equally didn't want an MSP. I wanted something that sat in between. And the reasons for that is because when I looked at what had been happening over the last few years, what I'd noticed is that actually nobody really understood the process for our contingent labour workforce. They didn't really understand the costs either. And the costs would fluctuate hugely in terms of conversion fees, markups, increased, obviously, markups if you go through an agency, and you're also paying the MSP fees as well. So really, cost predictability was a big challenge. Also compliance, because you run the screening and everything through the outsourced provider. Their compliance process was completely different to ours. So again, there's some hidden challenges in there as well. Also, our contingent workforce are a really important part of our business, and I think that it's really important that we treat them in exactly the same way. And actually, what Christine was mentioning earlier around the employer value proposition for contingent workers, did we know what benefits they could get? Do we know what their issues are, their challenges are? Do we even know the technology works in terms of timesheeting systems? Is it as good as it could be? So what we wanted to create was increased ownership, but we wanted to be more connected really to our contingent workforce as well. There was also some flexibility needed. And the reason why I say that is because going into creating a brand new business, we don't really know what our business is going to look like in the next 2 years, because we didn't just change what we did, we changed our business model entirely to a B2B business model where we're going out as a contract development and manufacturing business. We're no longer global pharma, so we've got no footprint for what our workforce is necessarily going to look like in the future. So we needed flexibility in terms of being able to chop and change within the contracts or any contract that we would develop with someone. So Giant were the back end of our managed service provider solution. So they would do the timesheeting and also payroll. So I just got in contact with Giant and I said, look, I can't find the solution that works for me. Is there something else that's basically in between? So we created a solution, and actually for both of us, I suppose I'm right in saying this, it's relatively new as a process at the time, because what you were removing is the MSP, and you were removing any agencies in the middle, and actually we even removed the screening, so we manage the screening ourselves now. So we had to design the transition process, design the systems, and design end-to-end what it would look like. And when I talk about an unknown process, I'm being truthful in the sense that we knew nothing about what it looked like. So it was digging around and trying to find out who our contingent workforce actually were, you know, how they got paid, what their contractual arrangements were. So we had to kind of feel through that process together with a really tight window of about 4 weeks in terms of making that happen. The other solutions that we did look at to kind of de-risk our situation at that point in time was having an increased number of fixed-term contracts. Now, if any of you work in recruitment, and I assume you all do, you'll know that fixed-term contracts are almost like the clanger. They're the job that nobody really wants most of the time because you don't get the increased rate on the contingent side, and equally you get no real, I suppose, commitment from the company that they're going to employ you in the long-term basis. They also have a challenge that once you reach 2 years within our business, we need to find a permanent place for them. And as I mentioned before, you know, we're a new business, so we don't really know, and we are a bit commitment phobic at the moment in terms of bringing people into the business, because our workload will go up and down depending on how many new contracts we win and how many new technologies that we introduce into the business. So actually, fixed-term contracts weren't a way of de-risking, and 2 years later, they create quite big problems as well, and they're really hard to recruit. So, in terms of the process overall, I mentioned the timeline of about 4 weeks. I would say to anybody going through that process, give yourself a bigger window. We had very little choice in this, but if you can, give yourself a bigger window of time, because designing the solution end-to-end in terms of the compliance, the tech, making sure that the systems actually work, and also managing the communications with your contractor workforce, that's a lot to do within 4 weeks. Timesheeting solutions are really important as well, because it's not just somebody's ability to enter their time, it's also who can approve, can you change them easily if you change approvers, are they easy to access? So again, you know, test the systems yourself and see how they work. The communication schedule is really important as well, because what you're creating is a significant amount of change for people, and their natural instinct, or from our contingent workforce, was, oh God, is it another agency coming in? Is this going to be worse for us than it is at the moment? So it's all around communication and education in terms of, well, actually, this is completely different, because you're going to be dealing with us as an organisation in the way that you normally do, but also there's less middlemen in the process, because actually Giant is a payroll and timesheeting solution. There isn't going to be an agency and an MSP in the middle of that as well. So ongoing support was really important as well. So actually making sure that their response times in terms of the provider that you choose are really quick, and also that they recognise that during the kind of 3 months after you've made the transition, there is going to be more support that's needed, and they're going to have to handhold you throughout the process, as well as making sure that they give you all the information that you need. So we created materials in terms of how to use a portal, we created materials in terms of the benefits offering Giant has, and also created other mechanisms to make sure that we retain our contingent workforce. So one of them, for instance, was a retention bonus. So we didn't see a huge amount of turnover before the end of contracts. Flexibility to change, so I covered this a little bit earlier, but we went through the process originally with Giant, and we had their screening provider managing our screening for us. Because we have relatively low numbers of individuals within the business actually managing recruitment end-to-end, it wasn't really working having a separate system. So about 6 months in, I said, look, I need to be flexible to change the screening solution. So it goes through us, and we use a company called Zinc. So it's really, really quick, really, really easy to use. So they're Giant were like, fine, that's absolutely fine. You can change and you can flex depending on what you need. So again, that flexibility to change and not being stuck in very long-term, rigid contracts was really, really key. So that's the overall case study, I would say. In terms of impacts post-implementation, I mean, the fluctuation of cost is obviously a big one, and the visibility of cost is a big one. I mean, overnight, we shaved £50,000 off our cost in terms of our contingent worker force, which, again, was a huge, huge benefit for us. There was more cost hidden elsewhere because we couldn't see where the spend was tracked accurately in the past. So that doesn't include things like conversion fees, and it also doesn't include additional fees that we would have had for the MSP because of the way it was charged within a global organisation. So just around an estimate of 50k overnight. Also, in terms of feedback from contractors, what they started to understand was actually we knew more about our processes, so we could resolve queries quicker, we could give them the information that they needed. There wasn't mouthpiece in the middle of the total process. So I would tell the MSP would tell Giant, and then Giant would speak to the contractor. It was just Giant, us, and the contractor. So we were able to give them more information and create a better experience overall. So I'd say in terms of outcomes, they are the two major ones that I would say in terms of the benefits of moving to a payroll and time-sheeting solution as opposed to using an MSP and then lots and lots of agencies in between. So that's me.